it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
Welcome to Out of Bounds. Josh Durso and Nate Sharman here with you after an absolutely blockbuster day in the professional golf world. The PGA Tour and LIV Golf are now one. They've merged. The news came out of absolutely nowhere, and we're going to talk more about that news here in a couple minutes. But first, Nate, just sort of what was your take? What was your feeling when the news hit? We saw it on Twitter first, and obviously we're going to talk about what players knew or didn't know. Even a lot of them were seeing it first on Twitter like we were.
Right. Just absolute shell shock this morning when I saw that news. You know, we did our podcast last night, right? You know, about 15 hours ago, we were sitting in these same spots talking about the memorial, and we even talked a little bit about the LIV versus PGA talk, right? So that podcast is a little bit by the wayside now. So we're back here now talking a little emergency podcast about this huge news with the LIV Tour and the PGA Tour, DP World Tour all merging with the PIF and making one entity, right? It's just, I'm a guy, if you know me out of here, I live online. I'm constantly on my phone, refreshing Twitter, scrolling through in different forums and stuff and seeing stuff. And when I first saw it, CNBC was first with it. They put it up on their ticker this morning, and I had a cousin actually send it to me. He took a picture of his TV and sent it to me and said, "Is this real?" And I was like, "No way, that's real. Like what?" And I immediately went to Twitter and I'm looking through my sources, and I then searched LIV Golf, right? And I'm looking through it, and I'm like, people are, reacting in real time to seeing the same thing my cousin saw, watching CNBC and seeing that ticker. And you're like, what? Like, wow, this is crazy. I mean, we're 1 year removed from Dustin Johnson leaving the PGA Tour last year at the Memorial, announcing that he's going to leave and defect from PGA Tour, go to LIV Golf. And now we have this just a year later. It's so out of left field this morning for everyone to come out and say, okay, we're joining together. Like you said, Josh, players didn't know. It seems like Greg Norman didn't know. There's some questions about his potential future with this new golf tour. It almost feels like kind of a simulation. And with the fact of, us in the Northeast, and anyone else in the Northeast will know this too, with the wildfires going on in Canada, it's got a real eerie feeling outside too. So those two combinations today has made me really think maybe this is just a simulation.
One hell of a 1-2 punch, I can tell you that much. I think my big takeaway, at least initially, was just the immediate reaction and how well kept this secret was. A deal like this,
it's crazy how nobody knew.
A deal like this isn't born overnight. Like this clearly took some time, and I'm curious who's known over the last several weeks. I've got a couple hunches, but we'll talk about that more later. It's just very impressive to me to see how this was executed, and maybe not impressed in the traditional sense, just more or less shocked that it was executed the way it was, and without warning. You said, CNBC dropping that news down in their ticker first.
It's an atomic bomb this morning, really.
Such an unassuming way for such gigantic news to be made. It's just dropped on the ticker.
It could be the biggest.
CNBC.
I mean, I might be overreacting and being a little dramatic since it just happened, but it could be like one of the larger sports news in history, right? I mean, like this doesn't just happen with entities for sure. Golf's a little bit different in the fact that, you have a bunch of different governing bodies, but it's just crazy. I know Josh, you've done a nice job of kind of outlining the facts here on our script. So let's go through those and get those straight before we dive into more. So lay us on those.
Yeah, so normally we kick off the show with 5 fast facts, but today we've got way more than 5 fast facts to give you. So let's get into what we know right now, according to the documentation that has been either released or handed out by the PGA Tour and all other entities involved. So PGA Tour continues operating as a 501c3. That's important. Will take all business and media rights from LIV, PGA Tour, DP World Tour, and rolls them into a for-profit entity. That entity does not have a name yet. The PIF, who operates LIV, will make a capital investment into that entity, and a plan will be built in the coming months to grow the collective commercial businesses, accelerate golf growth and fan engagement. Remainder of LIV season will not be impacted. So LIV Golf will continue through the end of 2023, and to all pending litigation between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf. LIV players will have the chance to reapply to the PGA and DP World Tours after this season. That process is yet to be determined, but the PGA Tour says it's going to be fair and objective. Not really sure what that means in this current state.
Nothing's fair and objective right now.
Yeah. Board of directors of the new entity will oversee and direct all golf-related commercial operations, businesses, and investments. A new schedule is going to be created for the PGA Tour, and that's apparently also going to include existing LIV events, it seems like, or there's going to be some kind of hybrid approach. This is really interesting because obviously we've only just begun the quote new PGA Tour schedule. So what's that going to look like? The PIF will be the exclusive first investor in the new entity, this new entity that is separate from the PGA Tour but oversees all of the tours collectively. They will have a right of first refusal on any new capital that may be invested into it, including investments into the PGA Tour, LIV Golf, and DP World Tour. Interesting that the PIF could, in theory, I guess, deny investment into the PGA Tour, although it seems as that would be an unlikely outcome. The PGA Tour will hold a majority of voting interest in the new entity, and that will happen through the PGA Tour appointing board members, a majority of board members, to this new entity, the board of directors. The chair will be Yasser Al-Ramioun. I'm butchering that name, unfortunately.
I think you got it. I think you're pretty close.
Yeah. Jay Monahan will be the CEO. The one omission, I guess, Keith Pelly from the DP World Tour seems not to be included in the leadership of this new entity.
Or Greg Norman.
Yeah, and Greg Norman, obviously. But I think the writing was on the wall with that one. So those are the facts as we know them right now. And obviously there's more questions than answers. They did note that this is all going to be kind of worked out over the next 3 to 4 months. So framework is what we got today. Specifics are what we're going to get over the next 2 to 4 months.
Wow.
Tons of questions. Tons of questions.
Just, like I said earlier, it's atomic bomb that was dropped this morning on the golf landscape. June 6th, 2023 is going to be a date in the golf history books. Because that's the day the golf landscape changed forever. I know I might be a little bit dramatic with this, and sorry if I've been that way, but it's just, I'm almost speechless with some of it because I thought we were kind of getting to a point where, we kind of had this differentiation between the two tours. Wasn't the best for golf, but some of those things that we've talked about that LIV was doing, growing the game in terms of getting people that were interested in golf that were under the age of 35. I mean, they reported most of their viewers, or about 50% of their viewers, were under the age of 35. Whether you like LIV or Saudis or not, that's good. That's a bottom line good thing. So at the end of the day, it's hard to not be excited about this, Josh, because getting all these guys together and playing golf together is good. The amount of money and the sickening spots of where the money's coming from is a little bit tough to swallow. But from a golf standpoint, getting the best players playing against each other and growing the game in that regard is a good thing. So it is a little bit exciting to me in some aspects.
It's business. I think the big takeaway on that front for me personally is if you really start to dig into any large corporation in the US, you will find sources of investment and money that make you feel not great about the source of that investment and money.
That's how the PGA Tour has been operating for a while. And now it's just more in the forefront.
Okay, so first question, and I didn't put it on the script, but I really want to get into this. Tons of players clearly had absolutely no idea. Do we have any theories? Do you have any thoughts on who may have known about this in the lead up to it?
You would think that guys like Rory McIlroy, Tiger Woods, maybe put Ricky Fowler in that category, right? Some of the leaders of these player groups would know. We don't know yet. Justin Thomas, I guess, is another guy you can throw in there. I haven't heard anything either way if these guys knew. We do know that guys, these lower level guys, Colin Morikawa, Sahith Theegala, Dylan Wu, Callum Tarrant.
Guys, Colin Morikawa, isn't he like the seventh best golfer in the
and
world?
Colin Morikawa is a two-time major champion. He's won the PGA Tour. Like he's not like a Justin Thomas, right? He's not one of the leaders of, not one of the leaders of it. But these guys have been talking about Twitter and being on there and talking about what's happening. And it's just, like you said in the beginning, they're finding out exactly the same information that we are at exactly the same time. That's bad, incredible. In my opinion. This is a player-run organization like the PGA Tour too, where, they've talked so much about, well, we are going to do what's best for our players, right? Jay Monahan went rogue and decided that this is what's going to happen. It's going to be interesting to see, though, if Rory McIlroy and some of those other guys like Tiger knew about this before it happened.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting to me is I kind of feel like both entities had their hands tied. And as I look back at the last 2 years, how this was going to work for LIV needed their top guys to play terrible in majors and for their ratings to skyrocket. So they needed them to play well in the LIV exclusive events and for them to suck in the majors in order to keep them tied in, locked in. Instead, the opposite happened. And then the PGA Tour lost its incentive to stay separated because those top LIV guys performed really well in the first two majors of this year. I
think Phil knew that they were going to merge. I really do. He's been just so active on Twitter, and that really, we talked about Phil's Twitter fingers right last night. And I think he must have known because, or maybe he didn't, maybe he was just blind to it. And being Phil on the internet, we probably won't know if he knew or not. And it's probably vaguely not important, but it is interesting to think about if these big guys on the LIV Tour knew. Dustin would never tell you if he knows. Does Brooks Koepka know? Probably not. If anyone's going to know, it'd probably be Phil. He's the most business-sided guy on the LIV Tour, you would think, in terms of their personalities. So I think Phil know, though. That's my original hunch.
Yeah, and I think more guys knew on the LIV side than
that's probably true. Yeah,
the PGA Tour side. Yeah, I would say Phil, based on what he said on Sunday at Oak Hill, he made that comment about basically knowing some information that was going to be released in the coming days, and here we are. 2.5 weeks later, with this gigantic nugget in front of us. Rory, I feel like he knew. And I would be willing to bet that after defending the PGA Tour from the moral high ground that he had to defend the PGA Tour from for the last 2 years, only for the tour to essentially negotiate a deal behind closed doors without the tour, the players, really having a say or being clued into what was going on, has probably played into why he has performed so poorly. I don't see a scenario where that can't be true.
For sure, yeah.
I just don't.
I agree with you 100%.
A lot of questions, though. So let's talk about this one. Should players from LIV be coming back? We assume they're going to be coming back next year. How much should they have to pay to rejoin? Should they have to give up some of their money? You say zero.
I don't think they should have to. They made it. I mean, I know they made a choice, and I know that's how it goes. But the PGA Tour chose to join with LIV. I mean, Brooks Koepka we heard about how possibly he had some cold feet and wanted to come back to the PGA Tour, right? Those were just rumblings, of course. Also heard that, the LIV Tour could charge these guys 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 times their signing bonus if they were to defect. So it wasn't necessarily these guys' choice, right? I know they wanted to do that. But it wasn't Brooks Koepka and Cam Smith making this decision to go back to the PGA Tour. They wanted it. I'm sure they're thrilled that they can go back to the PGA Tour next season. But I don't think they should have to, they made a decision to take that money and move on from it. I don't think they should have to pay anything back in terms of getting back on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, I don't know what the dues situation is for the PGA Tour. I don't know how that works. My guess is there would probably be some sort of fee structure set up for the guys who did that, and they might have to pay a little more than typical touring pros, or maybe it's waived for the guys who didn't take the money or something to that effect. I don't know. Like, the PGA Tour no longer needs money because they're playing in the same world as the Saudis are now, which is a world of unlimited funds. So throw
Saudis
money
just
out
paid
the
a
window.
35-year-old soccer player $200 million a year, 35 years old to play soccer in their
Annually.
country.
Annually. It's wild.
And he's he's 35 years old. I've said it 3 times already, but he's past his prime, and they paid him over $200 million a year to play.
Yeah.
So money is not an issue.
No. So yeah, I would actually agree with your position that they shouldn't have to pay anything. They shouldn't have to pay anything to rejoin. I think they should have to play in some less than stellar events if they want to get back in.
Now that's interesting, because all these guys talked about not wanting to play as much golf, right? And that's the reason they went to LIV. What if some of these guys stay on the LIV Golf Tour next year? That's something that hasn't been taught around. It's something that just came into my head. You have some of these guys, maybe like guys over the age of 40, Ian Poulter just comes to my head for an example, Henrik Stenson. Why would they want to come back to the PGA Tour? Maybe they just stay on the LIV Golf Tour.
Is the LIV Golf Tour going to exist?
I would think so.
Is it going to exist?
Oh,
I don't think it's going to exist. Judging by what
that's a good point.
What the PGA Tour said in their announcement this morning, it doesn't look like LIV is going to, like, there might be some team events that are
that's a good
scattered
point.
throughout the season, but the LIV series as it is, like what is it, 12, 14 events?
Yeah.
That's over. I think
so. What are they going to do the rest of this year? It's just going to be like a joke? Like they're just going to...
I mean, they've got the money secured. They've got the money secured. They'll just play. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with ratings.
Right.
Do ratings bump now that they know that this is essentially, you get to watch these guys play in televised exhibition events that are previews for next year?
And I'm sorry if this is harsh, but it was already kind of exhibition golf and pointless to begin with.
It was.
It's even more pointless now?
I don't know. I almost feel like it's more it adds interest potentially because these guys are, I feel like it's a foregone conclusion that Cam Smith, Dustin Johnson, and Brooks Koepka are coming back. And boy, does that make things interesting. That puts golf in
a really good place.
Incredible place. So what do we think happens to the existing PGA Tour schedule? My feeling on this is that we're going to pretty much see the PGA Tour schedule that was or has been rolled out, announced over the last few months, play out at least for next year. And linking back to the question that we just debated about how LIV guys are going to get back into this thing, what I think is going to happen is LIV golfers will have to play through some non-elevated events to essentially gain qualification.
Yeah.
Which will create, in my opinion, some real interest around these events that otherwise have not been drawing as much. They've been good golf tournaments. You and I, as like hardcore golf fans, have enjoyed it. But I think in terms of generating general viewership, this could really be big for some of these lower level events.
Do you think there'll be animosity between guys like Patrick Reed, Rory McIlroy? We saw him throwing a tee at him in Dubai, about a year ago. Do you think these guys on the range, they already were giving them a little bit of glaring looks at these majors, but at the end of the day, they were being pretty civil. I wonder if all that just goes to the wayside, like everything just gets forgotten about.
Oh, I think it's
probably how it's going to be, right?
Because I mean, for all the frustration that we've seen or angst, I guess, we haven't really seen a ton of the Brandel Chambly style argument from anybody on tour other than Rory early and a couple other players early. I think the bigger problem for the PGA Tour right now is the unrest that they're going to have to deal with among players who just feel like they were left out.
Right.
This is allegedly a players' tour.
Yeah.
Allegedly. I say allegedly because I don't think it is.
I think players are going to be really upset. Dylan Wu took to Twitter today, and he was really upset. And I agreed with a lot of the stuff he said. Colin Morikawa, Theegala wasn't as upset. I would venture to believe that Homa will put something out. I don't think I've seen this at the time of recording yet. I haven't seen anything from him.
No.
I guess I'm sorry to go off script here, but that just begs the question: 2023 Ryder Cup. They gonna let him in? Brooks Koepka?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
They have to, right?
They're all in.
They're
would
already
say
going to, right?
Yeah, I think it was a kind of felt a bit like a foregone conclusion before. Now it's a lock.
Yeah.
There's with this all being settled, especially the legal stuff. I don't see any scenario where LIV guys aren't playing. Could even see a scenario where sponsors might be inclined to give exemptions to different players who maybe want to play this year.
Oh, that's a good point.
A PGA Tour event.
Yeah, you'll see some of those guys play in PGA Tour events. That's a really good point, Josh. Now they're able to, you would think, right? Since this merger, there's
technically,
no barring from PGA Tour events anymore.
The argument is that they have to reapply for membership next year, but you're not going to see any of these guys be denied. So
I mean, you can invite anybody to a sponsors invite. I could select the sponsors invite and play up in Ontario in a couple days.
Yeah.
Anybody can play. There's no restrictions on that. And now that these tours are merged, they can't say, "Oh, you can't play on my tour." Well, you're the same tour at this point, practically. So that's a good point, Josh. Great to bring that up.
One thing on the Rory stuff. Do you think this has affected Rory's play? Do we think that this has been the reason or part of the reason why Rory's play has been as abysmal as it has been?
I think so. There's just got a lot going on with Rory, mentally. And we talked about having to take that step back, and we saw him at the PGA Championship. Someone asked a question about LIV, and he said, "If I had a crystal ball, but I don't have a crystal ball," and he's not answering really any sort of questions. I've more really answered a little bit of a LIV one as it pertained to the Ryder Cup, but we've seen him take a little bit of a step back, and he's playing better. Over the last 2 months, he actually was in the top, 15 to 20 at the PGA Championship, and the same for the Memorial. Held a 54-hole lead, didn't convert on Sunday, played rather poorly, but it definitely was taking a toll on him. So, and for Rory's sake, and for as a person, I hope he can get out of this and play better golf afterwards, because he deserves it. He's one of the best players in the world.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I'd also add to that I hope that this gives him the opportunity to have some weight lifted off his shoulders.
Yes, for sure.
And, push comes to shove at the end of the day. Once we get past the frustration among players, aside from a couple of reports that I'd seen on Twitter that maybe some players were thinking about suing the PGA Tour over how this was executed, I don't think that's going to go anywhere. Once we get past the actual frustration among players of how this was announced, and frankly, how they feel about Jay Monahan, because he basically got a promotion out of this deal after not being the commissioner for the last 2 seasons for the tour. I think everyone will just get back to playing golf. Yep. I think a lot of this will go by the wayside. There will be some questions to be answered about schedule and whatnot, how much money, where, what sponsors are where. I don't think there's going to be a ton of change though at the end of the day. One question that I didn't throw on here that I do have a couple quick thoughts on involves the potential that this deal was struck because of the DOJ investigation into the PGA Tour, the antitrust investigation. Nate, obviously, I know you and I haven't really talked a ton about this. A couple of people have posed the theory that maybe this was the path of least resistance for the PGA Tour as the DOJ began digging into the PGA Tour. My pushback to that would be this. If the DOJ started to find some things that prompted a serious antitrust investigation, this deal is not going to stop that. Okay. So understand if you, cause you're going to see a lot of those takes over the next few days. If the DOJ found something that violated antitrust laws in the US to the point where they could potentially take them down via court, they would. simply put, they would.
Right.
The reality, though, is in the United States, we operate under a capitalist economic system that, frankly, provides a lot of leeway for large corporations, for-profit and even for nonprofit entities to be able to do a lot of things that folks who are not in the C-level of these organizations would be very frustrated to see happen, and be very bothered, frankly, by how they are operating on a moral side. Again, we kind of brushed over it with the investment from Saudi, investment sources, whether it be coming from China or Saudi Arabia or whoever is the day-to-day opponent of the U.S. That is simply a reality of how the global economy works. So that's all I'm going to say about that. We can talk more about the business side of that whole mess as it pans out. But I think that is also going to be something that gets not shoved under the rug, but I think that's going to be a part of this story that goes away.
Yeah, and I think that's just going to take so long to figure out too. You won't hear about that much. I don't think.
No. Yeah.
Maybe in 2 or 3 years, but
yeah,
by that
it's
time
years
we'll
away.
Forgotten
it's
about
literally
Greg
years
Norman
away.
and LIV Golf Tour, anyways.
Yeah. Any other last thoughts here before we wrap it up about the news, or what you're most interested to see, maybe learn in the next couple days? I'm most interested to learn just with the money that these players accepted, if they get it, because we've heard sometimes that they're guaranteed, some that they're not, some are 2-year deals, some are 3-year deals. What's going to happen? Are these guys going to take? Are the Saudis going to take a portion of the $200 million they gave to Brooks Koepka? Are they going to let him leave with $200 million? I'm really interested to see that. At the end of the day, I know it's not a huge thing, but it's just interesting to me to see if these guys are gonna have that money to take home with them, and also that as that pertains to guys like Hideki Matsuyama and Will Zalatoris, even like Tiger Woods, who declined. I mean, Tiger Woods declined up to $1 billion. Hideki Matsuyama, I think his number was on $400 million. So are these guys, are they going to see that if, like I just talked about, if Brooks Koepka leaves with that $200 million, is Hideki going to be like, oh no, or Willie Zalatoris, oh crap, that I didn't take that money? Because at the end of the day, it was a 1-year extravaganza. I mean, at the end of the day, when your name goes in the record books, when Brooks Koepka's put in the Golf Hall of Fame with however many majors he ends up winning, I don't really think a lot of people are going to talk about the year and a half or year that he spent on the LIV Golf Tour. I don't really think that's going to be talked about that much at the end of the day in the grand scheme of things. I agree. And I'd also add to that, contrarian thought, now perhaps everyone can get paid. Sure. There is absolute, like, if for the absolute cynics out there, right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm not even commenting on this portion of it, but if this is nothing more than sports washing and the Saudis just wanted to spend a boatload of money for the sake of doing so, maybe they didn't love doing it with LIV because the LIV product just didn't take off quite the way it did. But working with the PGA Tour and working within the existing golf infrastructure, that money will be well spent. So perhaps instead of worrying about, a handful of guys who took an exorbitant amount of money to join LIV, maybe this new corporation is going to be making significant payments to players. Let's hope. As remedy. Let's hope it's not just filling Jay Monahan's pockets, right? Let's hope it's going to the players. One last thing for me, Josh, before we go. Sorry, I keep adding on. I was really excited to come on here tomorrow and talk RBC Canadian Open and the longest day in golf, which turned into today. Longest day in golf was supposed to be yesterday with US Open qualifiers. Now it's today. Yeah. With this news coming out. But I was excited to talk about some storylines there as I've been following along and learning some of those from the qualifier and the Canadian Open. So head on over to our TikTok. I'll be on there tomorrow at TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and here on YouTube, talking about some of those storylines and getting ready for the RBC Canadian Open, because we're still playing golf. No matter what happens in this news today, we're going to continue out the 2023 season and crown a champion up in Ontario this weekend. All right. Like Nate said, follow us over there on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. for all of that. That is going to do it for this edition of Out of Bounds. For the latest golf news, new podcast episodes, and plenty of other content, check out the website, outofboundsgolfpod.com. And remember, whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time on Out of Bounds.